Welcome, everyone. We're going to wait for a few more participants to join us.
We're coming in.
Looks like people are coming in. Hello, and greetings on this beautiful spring evening. My name is Laurie McGavin Bachman, and I work in the Adult Programs Department here at the Ridgefield Library. Tonight we are beginning a 6-part series of environmental programs via Zoom that focus on climate change and making smart energy choices on consecutive Mondays at 6 p.m. through May 24. This series is co-sponsored by the Ridgefield Library and the Ridgefield Action Committee for the Environment, known as RACE or RACE. Topics will range from installing a solar system on your home to replacing your oil furnace and HVAC with geothermal to electric vehicle charging. You can put your questions in the chat as we go along at the bottom of your screen at any time during the presentation so that we have kind of an interactive experience tonight. Tonight, we have a very special guest to kick off our series, Ridgefield's first selectman, Rudy Marconi. We'll talk about the town's relationship to race and about what the town has done, is doing, and plans to do to help reduce energy use. Will you please welcome Rudy Marconi?
Rudy, you're there.
No one told me I was muted. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining into this program. I want to thank the Ridgefield Library for what they do for our community, and thank RACE, the Ridgefield Action Committee for the Environment. They have been absolutely incredible in the last 15 years, 20 years maybe, since RACE was founded many, many years ago. So I'm pleased to be here to introduce the Ridgefield Action Committee's program, helping all of us understand what we can do to save energy and to reduce carbon emissions. RACE has been a valuable, and I mean a valuable part of Ridgefield's work dedicated to helping us understand what we can do, all of us, to improve our environment. And now with the increasing threat of our changing climate, they become more important than ever to help us all learn what we can do to reduce our dependency on carbon emissions. The town has been committed to lowering our dependency on carbon and at the same time reducing our spending on energy. Natural gas was substituted for oil and town buildings, oils in schools and town buildings several years ago. Now we realize that natural gas is a fossil fuel, but we were able to reduce our dependence on oil by 36% in those buildings, which was incredible. And gas burns a lot cleaner. We have solar panels being installed. We've done 4 schools at this point, and all 9 will have solar panels in the next 2 years, saving on average about $20,000 per building. Solar will also be added to the Venus building and Yanity Gym. Branchville and Scotland schools have already received upgrades in LED lighting in the inside and our parking lots, as well as our street lamps. Every one of them have been converted to LED. And originally, Eversource wanted to replace them with metal halide because it was in their inventory. And the town of Ridgefield took a position and said, absolutely not, we have to have LEDs. So we were successful there. We have a grant in now under the CMAQ program, which is congestion mitigation and air quality improvements with the state of Connecticut, for 6 electric vehicles and a commensurate number of charging stations. These are critical to our future, ladies and gentlemen, and critical to us as a government, leading the way and leading by example to let you all know how important it is to reduce carbon emissions. We see it every night. If you're on the Smithsonian or National Geographic, you're going to see something about carbon emission and climate change. We need to take the bull by the horns, take a leadership position and move this forward. And the Board of Selectmen is presently considering how best to proceed. We had the Energy Committee give us a recommendation on several possible alternatives, whether it's electric buses or heat pumps or whatever action we take. Having said what we are doing, let me conclude by reminding everyone that the town only accounts for a fraction of the carbon usage in Ridgefield. It is the heating of everyone's home, the air conditioning, the electric grid, the cars that account for most of Ridgefield's emissions. So we are going to make progress, and everyone needs to do their part. That's why we're here tonight, to talk about how you the watcher, can help. Thank you.
Thank you, Rudy. My name is Vincent Giordano, and I want to thank you for your leadership and your partnership on this issue. It's much appreciated. Just a note about RACE, for those who are interested. The Ridgefield Action Committee for the Environment is a group of volunteers, and you're welcome to join. We're like-minded individuals that are concerned about the environment, and we're action-oriented enough to do something about it. If you're interested in joining, our email address is raceenvironment. Don't double up on the E, raceenvironment@gmail.com. I'm here tonight to introduce our presenter, Roberta Barbari. She is a Ridgefield resident and is the Vice President for Global Sustainability for PepsiCo. Roberta is an environmental scientist and engineer with over 25 years of experience in corporate environmental sustainability. This evening, she will facilitate a workshop which introduces En-ROADS, the climate solution simulator developed by MIT Sloan and climateinteractive.org. Welcome, Roberta. Stage is yours.
Thank you, Vincent. Thanks, Rudy. Pleasure to be here, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our first session in our series. I'm going to share my screen here and get right to the beginning of my presentation. I'm going to spend a few minutes, everyone, grounding us in some of the, well, first of all, I'll introduce the En-ROADS model, which is a publicly available climate system model that anyone can find. We'll post the link in the chat later on in the session. Really cool tool that I was introduced to about a year ago, and as a climate professional, I fell in love with it, frankly. So that's the purpose of this session, is to introduce you to this tool that will help all of us understand the solutions to climate change and how effective they can be. But I do want to spend a little time in the beginning talking about some of the science and some of the effects that we can expect from climate change before I jump into the model. First of all, this is kind of a funny saying that a guy named John Sturman from MIT Sloan made this comment a few years ago. Research shows that showing people research doesn't work. And the reason I bring this up is because John is the head of MIT Sloan, that's MIT's business engineering branch. They partnered with a little NGO, a little nonprofit called Climate Interactive, to bring all that climate research that was out there in the scientific and academic fields together into one easy to understand systems model. And what you're seeing here is the dashboard for En-ROADS. It's a cutting edge simulation model where you can test various climate solutions and see if we can get as a world to a climate change scenario that is less than 1.5 degrees Celsius of change. So what you see on the screen here is on the upper right is where we're headed in terms of temperature rise, 3.5 degrees Celsius. That's about 6.5 degrees Fahrenheit if we do nothing. And the levers that you see down here are some things that we'll play with later on in the presentation live on the internet site. But it gives us a really good feel for what it will take to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees C or less. En-ROADS is taken the world by storm in the last year and a half since it was made public. This map is shows you how many En-ROADS simulations have been going on by En-ROADS ambassadors like myself more than 30,000 participants in 65 countries in less than 2 years, which is pretty impressive. So before we jump into the main event, let's briefly review the science here. What's at stake from climate change? First of all, what you can see here is in the millennia since 1950. So down here is 800,000 years before 1950, right up until 1950s level. CO2 has never been above this dotted white line. Millennia and millennia, CO2 has been relatively stable in the environment. And then something happened in 1950, and where we see ourselves now in 2019 is at over 400 parts per million of CO2 in the atmosphere. That's what is causing climate change or global warming. So this was a tipping point here, right around 1950, and we've been blowing past the planetary boundary for climate ever since. Now, CO2 is not the only greenhouse gas that's causing global warming or climate change. There are actually 6 of them. You see them listed here, and you see the relative contribution that the emissions of each of these types of gases is making to the level of overall CO2 in the atmosphere. This big brown area down here is where I want to focus. This is the carbon dioxide emissions from burning fossil fuels. So all the gasoline that we burn in our cars, the fuel oil that we use to heat our homes, the fossil fuels that utilities like Eversource use to generate the electricity that we need, that all falls into this brown category, which, as you can see, is the majority of fossil fuel CO2-based emissions. So where do these come from? This is a breakdown of that brown blob from the prior slide. So coal and oil together make up the majority of the emissions of CO2 when we burn them. So world is burning a lot of coal, we're burning a lot of oil, blue is natural gas. So these are the 3 big fossil fuels that are driving that 68% contribution of fossil fuel energy sources to the climate change problem. Bear with me with a little more science here, folks. This is a graph of global temperature change. No need to really know the historical data set names. All you need to really see is the undeniable rapid rise, especially since 1970, in average global temperatures. So we're already above 1 degree Celsius of temperature increase since the pre-industrial 1850s or so. So we have a problem, and the problem is getting worse. What would happen if we were not able to stop that trend? So we're at 1 degree C of temperature increase now. What happens if it gets to up to 3 or 3.5 or even 4 degrees Celsius of warming? Arctic sea ice, gone 2 out of every 3 summers, and it doesn't take much to envision what that would do to iconic species like the polar bear. 50% of insect species lose half of their habitat range. The world runs on insects. We can't survive without them. They are at the bottom of the food chain, and they make up the foundation for the food chain. Today, if we have what's called a 100-year drought, it means that the odds are that a drought of that severity would only happen once every 100 years. In a 3+ degrees Celsius warmed world, 100-year droughts would occur every 2 to 5 years. Near and dear to my day job corn yield. So I work for PepsiCo. We sell a fair amount of Doritos made from corn. Corn yields worldwide would decrease by 25%. Imagine what that would do to instability in food supply for billions. So bad things will happen if we cannot slow this train down. Bringing it a little bit closer to home here. This is Lower Manhattan today. The blue is water. One of the impacts of global warming that we're already seeing is sea level rise, melting polar ice caps, warming of the ocean, all leads to a rise in sea level. What would Lower Manhattan look like in a 3.5 degrees C world? All of this would now be underwater. So if you work in Lower Manhattan, you're probably going to be working from home instead of in the office. Again, a little hard to picture. So here's what it would look like. The iconic bull, Wall Street today, the iconic bull of Wall Street tomorrow. So these are just, a little bit of a rapid slideshow of the negative impacts that we can expect if we can't slow the rate of average temperature rise. So what do? It's overwhelming. Small piece of good news that I have for you today is En-ROADS can really help us understand what we can do. Not only can it tell us what the solutions are, but it can show us the level of impact that those solutions will have on slowing climate change. So again, I bring you back to this dashboard. Before we jump into the tool itself, let me tell you a little bit about this. This is for the wonks in the crowd, the engineers, the system modelers, if there are any out there listening tonight. It's a systems dynamics model, and just to repeat the words on the screen, a high order nonlinear differential equation model, whatever that means. Built by MIT Sloan and Climate Interactive, took them 7 years to build it. They used all of the best available science on models that go back 30 years. And every time you move one of those sliders, and by sliders, I mean these things here like coal, that's a slider, that black dot. There's software in the background calculating 14,000 equations and drawing new lines on the graphs in milliseconds. It's really an amazing, amazing tool. Where does the data come from? Again, this slide is aimed at helping you believe in the model, believe in the data that goes into it. It really is the best available science that we have today. There's a nearly 400-page reference guide that sits in the back of this that is freely available. They go through their assumptions for every parameter and every equation. Very, very transparent. They regularly calibrate it and test it against a suite of other models, including models used by NASA, International Energy Agency, and more. And they're very transparent about all of the assumptions that back it up. So, drum roll, please. Now's the time to jump into the model. With one exception, I do want to run a poll. Andy, would you mind launching the poll? So the 5 ways to reduce greenhouse gas emissions or to reduce carbon emissions, which one do you think can be the most impactful in solving climate change? So you have to pick one. Is it everybody converts to renewable energy? Is it federal tax on fossil fuels and major governments around the world? What about if we max out energy efficiency in buildings and industry? How about tree planting, massive tree planting effort? Would that be the solve? Or can we look to the earth, agricultural practices that improve soil health, because healthy soil stores carbon. So if you can please choose one of those. And Andy, when you get to a point where we've got the majority of responses, if you can launch the results, we'll take a look and see what people think. Interesting. We have a little bit of a split, not a clear majority, but top three would be renewable energy, federal tax on fossil fuels, and energy efficiency in buildings and industry. Not a lot of support for tree planting or for ag practices. Okay, so thank you for that. I'm going to come out of this presentation. Let me come out of stop share for a second, bring up En-ROADS, do another reshare. Okay. So we are in the famous En-ROADS. Gavin, if you haven't already, if you could post the link in the chat box, folks, you can play with this on your own at will. Again, publicly available, free, totally transparent. Let me orient us to the dashboard. And feel free, by the way, to post questions in the chat box if you have, and Gavin will interrupt me, and we can pause and answer questions as we go. No need to wait until the end to ask questions. What we have in the upper left is the sources of primary energy. So similar to one of the graphs that I showed you that had the big brown blob of fossil fuels, this breaks down fossil fuel energy sources, renewables, and nuclear. So you can see that there's a pretty, generalized break in the wedges on the left. On the right are greenhouse gas emissions. This is the trajectory that the world is on today. It's the current scenario, leading us in 2100 to temperature increase of 3.6 degrees Celsius or 6.5 degrees Fahrenheit. That's if we do nothing. Fortunately, what we have down here is the somethings that we can do. Each one of these, I think there are 18 levers, are climate change solutions. So everything from reducing the use of coal to increasing the use of renewables to maxing out energy efficiency in transportation, electrifying our transport, improving energy efficiency in buildings, slowing down population growth, slowing down economic growth. Over here, we have preventing deforestation, technology solves that are in nascent state or emerging state right now. Afforestation, that's another word for planting trees. So before we jump in and start playing around, I'm gonna pull some of the levers that you guys guessed were the big climate solves in a minute, but I want to change this graph to one that I like a little bit better. Yeah, that's the same one. Greenhouse gas total emissions. Bear with me a second. CO2 emissions. Try this one. No. All right, I'm gonna stick with that one. Okay, so I think the number one suggestion that you all had, or that most people thought would be most impactful, was if we all switch to renewable energy. So I'm going to pull the renewables lever. But before I do, I'm going to touch these three dots and tell you a little bit about what is happening when we're pulling the renewables lever. We're basically indicating that we are going to subsidize the use of renewables, and we can pick the years that we start and do a lot of fun things in the assumptions bar here. But we're basically going to pull this over here and highly subsidize the use of renewables. Let me do that again so you can watch what happens up in the upper two graphs. Pull it out. So we get a little bit of a dip here, not a huge amount. So we went from 3.6 degrees C's to 3.4. So we got 0.2 improvement off of this terrible trajectory that we're trying to avoid. What happened over here? Let me do that again so that you can see what happens. Green got bigger. And green is renewables. These three, the blue is natural gas, the orange is oil, and the brown is coal, got a little bit smaller. Not a huge amount smaller though. So I think one of the other options was to increase energy efficiency in buildings and industry. So let's see what happens when we do that. Oh, okay, now we're talking. We're getting quite a bit more efficient in buildings and industry. And let me click on these three buttons and we can look and see what that actually means. It means that we're getting 5% more efficient per year. And we're starting that trend this year. If you wanted to make that, if you thought, yeah, 5% globally in improvement in efficiency seems pretty aggressive, let's change that to 2, brings it down, and you can play around. So let's max that out again, because that was a nice drop. We're down to 3.1. Now the goal here, folks, is to get this number to 1.5. So we're still kind of far away from 1.5, but we're going to keep going. I think a number of you thought that a federal tax on carbon would be the way to go. Here it is down here, carbon price. Let's open up the assumptions and decide what we want to do. What do you think might be a reasonable dollars per ton price to set on carbon? Let's say 50. Oh, that's pretty good. Got us down from, I think, let's replay that. 3.5, I think we were at. Let me do this again. Bring this up to, there's 44. What do you think happens if I bring it all the way to the top? That's a pretty meaty chunk. I want to do this. I want to clear it again and just do the carbon price. So we're back to 3.6. What happens if we max out a carbon price? Drops a whole degree Celsius. Hugely effective. And maxing it out means $250 a ton of carbon implemented by every government in the world starting in 2021. So let me talk a little bit about what's happening in this graph when we're putting a price on carbon. Let's replay it. Watch the upper left graph. Which one of these almost disappears? It's coal. So coal, because coal is the most carbon intensive energy source that we have. In other words, it's the dirtiest fuel from a greenhouse gas emission standpoint, from a CO2 emissions. So if you're taxing the carbon emissions from fossil fuel energy, coal is getting hit really hard with that tax because it is the dirtiest. So coal has effectively been disincentivized out of the marketplace almost entirely. Natural gas and oil are still around, but they are much, much reduced. Now, is it really reasonable to expect that starting this year, every major government in the world would enact a $250 a ton carbon price? No, not going to happen. So I'm going to peel this back a little bit to more in that like $50 a ton. There are a couple of areas of the world that have a carbon price right now. Europe has a carbon price. It's called the emissions trading scheme. California has an emissions trading scheme. A number of other countries are thinking about it. but we're still a little far away, so we can't rely on that. Let's go back to the renewables, put that back out where we wanted it. Let's go back out here with energy efficiency. We're at 2.8. Again, we need to get down to 1.5. I'm going to take kind of facilitator's prerogative here and show you something that I found particularly compelling when I first was introduced to En-ROADS. And to make it really effective, I'm going to take out the carbon price and peel back. Well, let me go back to the beginning. What do you think would happen if coal is the dirtiest fuel that we've got? What do you think would happen if we taxed coal only? Okay, some kind of equivalent to the carbon price, because as we said, the carbon price hits coal really hard. That's not good enough in my mind. I'd like to push on coal a little bit more. So I'm going to open up the assumptions bar here, and I'm going to show you something kind of neat down here. This button here, stop building new coal plants. What happens if we just stop building new coal? Look at that. Now, we didn't tax coal. We just stopped building new ones. And we're still burning it. I mean, the world is still using coal in the existing coal-fired power plants that we have all over the world. We're just not building any new ones. And we dropped by 0.3 degrees. Thought that was really, really compelling. So again, that's my prerogative there. I just loved doing that. Renewables. Let me undo this one first before we go out here. Put that back. Any folks want to chime in and ask me to pull a lever that they're really interested in seeing? Gavin, if you have anybody coming in on the chat, or if you yourself have a suggestion, I'll be happy to do it.
Sure. I don't, there's nobody coming in the chat yet. Oh, somebody wants you to pull afforestation. Plant some trees.
Okay, afforestation. I'm going to max out afforestation.
That's pretty good.
I'll do that again. Oh, wait, sorry.
Yeah, just by itself.
Yeah, let me do afforestation just by itself. Not a lot.
No.
Point one.
Yeah.
This is one of the things I appreciate about En-ROADS is it's kind of a myth buster, because when I first was introduced to this, I, like many people, thought that planting trees would be much more impactful than it actually is. And I wanted to know why it wasn't more impactful. So we went to En-ROADS to find out. Click on the magic 3 buttons, and we get an idea of what are the limitations to tree planting. Well, first of all, you have to secure the land to plant the trees. East of the Mississippi, or no, sorry, east of the Rocky Mountains in the United States, guess how much of the land east of the Rocky Mountains is privately held land in the United States? I won't make you guess. 85%. So 85% of the land east of the Rockies in the US is private. You'd have to secure that land before you could start planting trees. So that they're building into their assumption that it takes 10 years to get the amount of land that we would need to even have the impact that we saw. And then there's afforestation planting time. Trees pull in carbon, they absorb carbon dioxide. That's why they are a climate greenhouse gas carbon solve. But they take a while to grow to a maturity where they're at their maximum carbon absorbing potential, and that is 30 years. So really important thing to do, plant trees, super important for many reasons. Biodiversity, it being, the primary, but it's only a small portion of the solve for climate.
Yeah, essentially it takes takes a long time.
Take-
The whole process just takes a long time to accomplish.
Yep,
Um,
and you need a massive amount of land. There's
Yeah.
another graph in here. This thing is full of really cool graphs that shows the amount of land area you would need just to get this 0.1 degree C change. And it's effectively the size of the country of India, which is one of the
Yeah.
largest countries in the world. So
Right.
really important to do reforestation, but we can't rely on it.
So there are lots of people jumping in the chat that want to see lots of different things. So carbon capture is, very similar to afforestation. We're just going to do it mechanically instead. And then people are interested in seeing the effect of methane, and also then, looking at synergies. And somebody also wants to jump back in time to 1977 and say, well, if we all woke up back then and replayed this, what would it look like?
Oh my gosh, what an idea that is.
Yeah.
Let me take those one at a time.
Sure.
So-
Sorry. Yeah.
No, that's okay. Technological, let me get out of here and show you what I did. Carbon removal technologies. I'm clicking on the 3-button thing here so that we can get an idea of what they are. I could just max out all of the technologies, or I could mess around with each of the individual technologies. So these are these detailed settings, something called bioenergy, carbon capture and storage, that's BECS. And you can give it a % or a start year. Direct air capture, this is pulling carbon out of the air directly. Again, potential and start year. Enhanced mineralization. This is something like, this is pulling carbon, CO2 out of the air and injecting it into rocks, basically, where it will stay for time immemorial, hopefully.
They're doing that in Greenland or Iceland, right?
That's
Yeah.
right. Yep. And then there's agricultural soil carbon sequestration. This was the 5th choice on that poll that not a lot of people bid into, but it's considered a technological carbon removal. Biochar is another technology where you basically take waste biomass like husks and fallen trees and wood waste, and you create almost charcoal with it. You burn it just enough to make it dense charcoal, and then you bury it so that remaining carbon is permanently encased in the soil, theoretically.
Yeah.
So having done a little bit of that technology, let me, oops, go back in here and take that out. And I'm going to max out this slide. I mean, this slider. Be thinking of how far down you think it's going to go. Okay, not bad.
0.4.
3.2.4 degrees change.
Which is like 4 times as much as afforestation, right?
That's right. Yep.
Yep.
Okay, let me do methane. So, and I'm looking at the clock. I've got 20 minutes, I think. Methane and other. This is a little bit of a potpourri of opportunities here. Again, I'm going to click the use detailed settings slide so we can see a little bit about what we're talking about. So agricultural and waste emissions. So this one is if there weren't as many cows in the world as there are today. So if we all became vegetarians and didn't need the vast amount of cattle and pork that we need now, animal proteins, the methane from those animals would drop. And the nitrous oxides, that's what this N2O is, that's from fertilizer use and application. Then there's energy and industry emissions. These are, I don't know if you remember the slide I showed with the various types of greenhouse gases. These are the smaller quantity gases that are sometimes very potent. F gases are found in refrigerants, for example. So those are your three areas here. If everybody became a vegetarian and we eliminated greenhouse gases from some of our industrial emissions, what would we get? Let's go back out and we'll pull the lever. Methane and others. Oh, let me zero it out so you can see this in it by itself. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
0.5 degree change from cutting back on animal protein.
So there was one person who asked about why the eliminating adding new coal plants worked so well, and I'm guessing it's because they basically have a life expectancy, and so after a while they crap out. So if you just finish building one this year, it's going to run for X amount of time, and then that's it. So if we stop building new ones, then eventually just coal just drops off to nothing, right?
You got it. And let's go back in here and I'll show you that in real time. Something I love about it. Any question that you have, you can figure out by looking in behind the curtain here. I'm going to turn this on and off and watch
Yep.
where it really drops off.
Yeah.
Right
Exactly.
around 2040.
So yeah, 40 years out or 20 years out or so, and it just starts to dive because they probably have a 25 or 30 year lifespan.
Exactly. So we wait them out basically if we don't make any new.
And that way the people who've invested and put money into them can get their money's worth, and then they go.
And they can,
do
that's
anymore.
right. Any other requests for lever pulls?
So there was one on electrifying transportation.
Okay.
And then several people have been asking, are there magic combinations of things that, just get us there, which I'm sure you're going to get to.
Yeah,
It's nice it is fun to play with them individually though and see their individual impact.
Absolutely. So electrification, 0.1 degree C. So let's take a look at this. This assumes that electrification of transport is highly incentivized year on year, and that we start right now. So, again, a small benefit. I will say with my PepsiCo hat on, this is hugely important to us. PepsiCo owns one of the largest private vehicle fleets in the world. We own all of our own trucks, the Frito-Lay trucks that you see on the road and the Pepsi trucks. We have a strategy that we're working on to electrify transport. We're taking possession of our first 100 Tesla semi trucks by the end of the year. So really hoping that the federal government can help incentivize that. But yeah, it's a small portion here. It's a significant portion of PepsiCo's climate change strategy.
If you just, the lever just below that, the building and industry electrification one, so that's a bit more powerful.
Here, I'll do that.
And what is nice about that is it's not a moving thing. So it doesn't necessarily require the batteries, or you could have different kinds of batteries that are heavier and
That's right.
less high tech stuff and do more impact.
Yeah, and let's pair the electrification with renewables. So if the grid went really renewable, you see the synergistic benefits there. Make the grid renewable, and that bleeds into the electrification benefits. How about zero carbon? So I talked about En-ROADS being a little bit of a myth buster. It certainly was for me, because even though I'm a lifelong sustainability professional and have been living and breathing fight against climate change for long time, there was a big part of me that was hoping that there would be a magic technology that someone like Bill Gates would invent, or Elon Musk would invent, that would get us out of this jam. And then I came to En-ROADS and I saw that 0.2 degree change.
And is that because whatever that new thing is would take a while to develop, and then once we had it, to employ it and build it out? And
you got it.
So we're going to do nuclear fusion or something. We figured that all out, but that by the time we get it and scale it up, it's 50 years from now.
Yep. And, you know, in the course of human history, you know, that's what it takes. It takes
Yeah.
20, 30, 40 years for a new technology to be invented, to come to scale and achieve its full potential. So that burst my bubble a little bit when I first used En-ROADS, but
Yeah.
that's part of the experience here. We have to come out of denial and move into action. So I'm gonna start playing around and see if we can get to.
Yeah, because we haven't got anywhere even close to 2 yet.
We
Right.
have not. I'm gonna put a carbon price on that's possibly realistic, you know, rather than the 250. Let's max out renewables because renewables are on the way. I think they've hit their tipping point, which is awesome. Let's do afforestation, frankly, because we desperately need trees. We desperately need repaired ecosystems for many reasons, including carbon. Let's stop cutting down trees. Let's finish the electrification path that we were on. We're getting there, 2.3. Let's do energy efficiency. Let's do energy efficiency in transport. Let's stop eating so much animal protein. Let's do some of the technology like soil carbon. And then what else do we want to do? We're almost there. Maybe slow down economic growth. Let's see if that does anything. Nope. Nope. Nothing. No impact on.
Yeah. Once you've done those other things, it doesn't make much
Doesn't
difference.
matter. Yeah, because you've taken care of the energy. You're
Yeah,
doing more.
Each
You're
person
using.
is using less stuff.
Yep, using less stuff, and the stuff they're using is clean.
Yep.
So let's push a few more people into vegetarianism. And that gets us to 1.5. So what you see here, folks, is we have to do it all. There's not one thing that is going to solve this problem for us, but there's a lot of things that help. So what I'm going to come out of this, and I want to go back to my slides and give you the bottom line. No silver bullet here, but there's plenty of silver buckshot. And that's what we really have to focus on. So what can each of us do? I liked this this infographic or this little illustration very much because it shows these expanding circles of influence. If you're just one person, there are things you can do. But if you expand out into just your private network, private, donating money, volunteering for things like race and the series of educational events that we as volunteers are putting on for you tonight. And then if you go beyond that into your social network, do things like swap consumer goods so you're not buying new, teach others. Then you move on to organizational opportunities, sharing ideas, changing processes, moving out into the public space, running for public office, creating laws, organizing, protesting, and then the cultural change in norms and systems that's possible when people can make huge change well beyond their own individual sphere. The last thing I'd like to do is launch my last poll. about to gauge how you all are feeling right now. So go ahead, Andy, if you could launch the poll and pick one of these questions. Feeling inspired, energized, maybe hopeful, maybe not. Maybe this has depressed you. Maybe you're overwhelmed, or none of the above. Just interested to see how people are feeling right now.
While we're waiting for that, somebody who asked about nuclear plants, and I think one of the issues with that is that they take a long time to build.
Okay. So depressed and overwhelmed are about 60% of our population here. So I apologize. I hope that the feeling doesn't stay with you, and that you can turn it into hope for action. I think the good news is that what we've got for you in the next few weeks is a series of very, very concrete things that you can do to be part of the solution instead of us being part of the problem. Dwayne is going to run a session on installing a solar system on your home. Then Gavin is going to talk about free energy audits. Beth is going to talk about oil furnace and HVAC with geothermal. Then Gavin's coming back to talk about heat pumps. And then Vincent will wrap up our series with a session on electric vehicle charging. So please join us. Delighted to have been here. Really hope you got something out of this series. And I really hope that you go out and play around with the En-ROADS model. Not only just to get a feel for what's possible, but to learn and maybe to teach others.
Thank you so much, Roberta. Really appreciate that. It was a fascinating demonstration of the technology and the model. And thank you, Gavin, for your help as well and making sure we got to the questions. Just a note for all the participants, the RACE members who will be presenting are committed to mentoring you on the different subjects. So feel free to reach out to us. We could help you buy an electric vehicle, answer your questions. We could help you with geothermal and HES audits and answering questions about En-ROADS. We want to help you make personal changes and smart choices. Thank you very much.
And on behalf of the library, we'd like to thank Roberta for an excellent and thought-provoking presentation. We thank Rudy Marconi for joining us tonight, and Gavin for helping with questions. And we'd like to thank our partner, RACE, for helping to organize this series. And finally, I'd like to mention that the next presentation next Monday is April 26th and is entitled Installing a Solar System on Your Home with Dwayne Escola. Thank you for attending. Hope you have a good rest of your evening and hope to see you next week. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Cheers.